Hey, welcome. I'm Kath Nolan, once high-performing perfectionist good girl turned goddess of balance, kicking even bigger goals. This is the podcast where we make balance doable for busy, overstretched working women, embracing your voice, honouring your feminine power and protecting your energy. This allows you to truly step into greatness for the sake of all you hold dear. This is balance, and I am so glad you are here claiming balance for yourself. I remember exactly where I was sitting the first time someone suggested to me that I might have ADHD. Those moments where people see you more than you see yourself are really powerful, right? I mean, I think that we are certainly the women who I work with, professional women who I work with, working women, often working mums, we are on a constant journey of self-discovery because our identities change. They have to change so much. Who we are fundamentally seems to shift at the major milestones in our lives. And so this journey of constant discovery, constant self-discovery, I think it's a really powerful one. But also there are moments in that journey that can be very confronting. Very confronting. I think any lens that enables you to look deeper at who you are and who you want to be is extraordinarily helpful from a development perspective, from a loving life perspective, from making sure that making your goal attainment easier. Richer lives are to be had when we know ourselves better. So thinking back to that moment when I first had somebody say to me, I think you might be ADHD, Kath. Thinking back to the surprise that I felt in that moment, surprise and also some, no, not me. No, not me. What you're describing is actually, this was my voice. What you're describing is actually the fact that I grew up in a household with ADHD. I live in a household now, kids with, there's neurodiversity present in my household. But no, not me. It's, I remember feeling at the time, what's the word? Proud that they were looking at me and seeing some of the strengths of ADHD, but also feeling as though it didn't quite fit. And the reason it didn't quite fit is because we have this stereotype around what ADHD looks like. Just the exact same that we have a stereotype around what introversion looks like. So introversion is, well, we think of it as being, that's the quiet person, right? No, you can actually be very much an introvert. You can absolutely prefer introversion and be a strong, loud, vocal communicator. But where your energy comes from is what determines whether you prefer introversion or extroversion, whether you get your energy from your internal resources or from external people. I think what I'm discovering most about ADHD is that these stereotypical labels that we attribute to ADHD, it's time for those to be challenged. It truly is time for those to be challenged. That moment that I had sitting in that chair, I can still see exactly the chair that I was sitting in when someone first said to me, I think you have ADHD, Kath. I can still see that chair that I was sitting in. I can feel the chair that I was in and my surprise in that moment. Well, I have to tell you, this conversation with Caroline, I had another one of those moments. In fact, this episode is, Caroline really brings it. She really brings it to this conversation. Who is Caroline? I haven't even told you yet. Caroline Beresford is an ADHD coach. She's a leadership coach. She works with kids, with students, with schools, with corporates, and she's doing some incredibly powerful work. I am so excited to bring this episode to you. I really thought that I was bringing this conversation. I thought that Caroline and I were having this conversation mostly about kids, but it turns out that it's mostly about women and what we expect of ourselves and what that looks like. Cannot wait to share this episode with you. Tune in. This is Caroline Beresford, the ADHD coach. Caroline, I'm so excited to chat with you today. So we are talking about ADHD, and particularly, so the Free to Be audience is predominantly working women, mostly, and there's been such a huge, rapid rise in diagnosis of ADHD in female adults. So why is that, do you think? Why do you think we've seen such a fast rise? Madam Expert, tell me your wisdom.
It's an important question, and one that's been trending for a while now. I think out there, because it's showing up so much on social media now, especially TikTok, and there's been quite a few famous celebrities in the media coming out and talking about their ADHD diagnosis as well.
Yeah.
And so
Fabulous humans.
yeah, absolutely amazing, incredible people. So it's very easy to fall into that narrative of, oh my gosh, every single person's got ADHD now. It's actually almost trendy to have ADHD, which is actually sort of quite invalidating for those who actually have had a formal diagnosis. I believe, and I know, I mean, the research out there says that, in fact, it isn't overly diagnosed. The reason why we've seen such an uplift in diagnoses, particularly in adult life, is because we've got more awareness now. We've got our, we've got access to more research that's been done. We've got more awareness around the fact that ADHD shows up really differently between different groups of people, namely boys and men versus women and girls. They show up very, very differently between the two genders. So I think we're lucky to be living in the day that we're living now, because we do actually have access to more clinical data and research.
Yeah, sure. Do you think, I mean, does it show up differently in kids compared to adults?
I think yes and no. Historically, ADHD was always thought of as, a little boy's condition. The quintessential, boy in, primary school being really disruptive in class, annoying other students, annoying the teachers, jumping up and down, bouncing off the walls. That's what, when I was growing up in school, that's what it was sort of known as. Yeah, absolutely. And so I think that's why the prevalence of diagnosis between boys and girls has always been more, because we weren't actually aware of, the differences between, the differences in presentation. So they do show up differently. I guess they're more pronounced in children versus adults, and that's because of the development of the prefrontal cortex, which is where that's like our control centre. That's where all of our our executive function happens. And when we have an ADHD wired brain, those executive skills, that executive function is impacted, and that's when the ADHD symptoms show up. So I guess as children, the symptoms are going to be more pronounced, and as adults, they're still going to be there, but maybe not as pronounced.
Sure. I have to wonder. I know that we're going to talk about self-care at some point in our conversation today, but I have to wonder if part of the reason why we see it more in kids is because kids have people really intensely caring for them a lot, whereas adults tend to be getting on with life and being busy, and we've got these enormous to-do lists, and we don't tend to focus on, health and wellness and I guess crafting the journey quite so much in terms of our wellness. Do you see that
Absolutely.
shifting?
Sorry, what was the question?
Do you see it shifting?
Absolutely. I think that, well, the more we talk about it, and the more fabulous people we have, brave enough and vulnerable enough to start speaking about their journey,
Yeah.
that's definitely helping the shift. But I think, sort of circling back to how you just described, the fact that children have, parents and loved ones that are caring for them, and picking up on little sort of hints at the fact that they might be struggling. I
Yeah.
think that in an ADHD diagnosis as an adult, and this is certainly through my own personal experience and the experience of the hundreds of adults that I've worked with, had the honour of working with up to date, it gets to a point where at some stage the mask is just, it's too difficult to keep the mask on anymore.
Sure.
And so we're seeing that, I've got several clients at the moment that are new mums, and they were
Yeah.
sort of questioning, what's wrong with me? Is it tight? Is it, is my brain got, foggy because I'm pregnant? And then once the kids come along, it's like, oh my goodness, it's there, but it's even worse now. And I like to sort of describe it as we sort of travel through the different stages of our lives, it's changing all the time, and our responsibilities and the expectations of ourselves and the expectations of others are shifting too. And I think that especially women, we're, it's like we're expected to be able to manage it, and keep all the balls up in the air, being a wife, a mother, a sister, a daughter, a career woman. And then at some point, we just can't sort of mask the underlying things that are going on, whether it be, anxiety or depression or ADHD. And we know now that anxiety and ADHD definitely go hand in hand. There's a high coexisting rate of, between ADHD and anxiety. So, and quite often...
That's so interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting because quite often what happens is that the client is actually diagnosed much earlier with anxiety, but in actual fact, once they get their diagnosis of ADHD later, because we're now finding out more and more about ADHD in women especially, and how it's showing up in women, we're sort of thinking, okay, well, was it ADHD all along? If that makes sense. So it's a bit of a chicken and the egg type situation. Yeah.
So can I ask you, please forgive my naivety here, when we say that anxiety and ADHD, there's a high correlation, is it that the anxiety is there because they have ADHD and don't know how to deal with that, and the anxiety comes from not dealing with the ADHD and not being forced to conform instead of understanding and working with who they are? Is it that, or is it on its own? Is it the anxiety on its own?
I think that in my experience myself, I think that my anxiety was driven purely by the underlying ADHD that I didn't actually know that I had. I went through, if we look at my school, I was actually looking at my school reports when I went through my ADHD assessment. That was about 3-4 years ago now. The school reports, I was high achieving. I was really super diligent at school, danced, played the cello, played the piano, tennis, I did everything. I was very busy. And I always wanted to sort of, I was quite critical of myself, actually, if I didn't sort of excel in everything that I did. But, that came at a price. So, in terms of just exhaustion and, fighting through that sort of tendency to procrastinate and leave everything up to the last minute and then, have to have all-nighters to get something done on time. So I think that was a big part of my the anxiety diagnosis that I got. But also, there was a study done, I'm not going to throw a year out there because I can't quite put my finger on the year. But there was a study done over in the United States by a researcher called William Dodson, and he was really interested in the whole idea of rejection sensitivity dysmorphia, or RSD is the acronym. Because ADHDers do struggle a lot with that sense of not being part of a tribe or being rejected, or that sense of, not having a sense of belonging. And so he was really interested in diving deeper into this rejection sensitivity and ADHD. And at the end of so basically he got two groups of adolescents. They're 12 years of age. And there was one group were neurodivergent, ADHD, and the other group of 12-year-olds were not. They were neurotypical. And at the end of the trial, his findings basically showed that by the age of 12, an ADHD child has received 20,000 more negative messages, whether they be direct through verbal, like speech, or direct through facial expressions. So 20,000 times more negative messages.
Oh, Caroline, that's crushing.
And it is, compared to their neurotypical peers. And so that's why now, you get to, you go through life basically sort of second-guessing yourself and thinking, I've done something wrong, but I don't quite know what it is. I'm in trouble, but I don't know what I've done wrong. That sort of underlying feeling that never quite goes away until you get the right support, of course. So, I think that's the crux of where the anxiety comes from.
Wow. That's really big. That's really, really big.
Yeah. So,
goodness me.
Yeah. So,
okay.
That's why it's so important to start teaching these gorgeous little human beings from an early age, to understand how their brain works so they can then advocate for themselves.
Yeah, for sure. Oh my God. Kids and adults. I was speaking to somebody recently just about the impact of childhood trauma and the ability for adults to parent themselves. I know that you and I are going to have another conversation very, very soon about how we can support kids. But I suspect that conversation is going to be what I've learnt through coaching women, what I've learnt from coaching mums, working mums, is that often we are so reluctant to do things for ourselves, but we'll do them for our kids. So if we can do something that builds ourselves up just for ourselves' sake, it's going to be so low priority. It'll be on the priority list, but we're not going to get around to it. But if you tell me that me looking after myself in this specific way is going to help my kids in this specific way, I'll do it. I will absolutely do it. I will do it with I will be diligent, and I will be, that I will put all of my high performing energy into that task. So I know that we're going to come back and have that conversation about how we support kids as well.
Yeah. Well, the beauty of children is they're like little sponges. And so
Yes.
if you can actually have, the mindset and the knowledge that everything that you do, Kath, your children
Yeah.
are watching. And so if you can
Yeah.
model self-care and putting yourself as a priority and sort of talking openly about the children, about, what your non-negotiables are. Like I got up this morning
Yes.
and, as you know, I drove over to Bondi and did
Yeah.
a swim because I
Yeah.
know that that's, swimming in salt water and doing my mindfulness at the same time.
Yeah.
And doing my breathing, they're the two things that set me up to have a really successful day, and my boys know that now. So
Yeah. I love
even
that.
though my son was annoyed that he had to catch the bus, he actually sent me a text message once he got to school and said, "Mum, I'm sorry I snapped at you. I know that you need to do your thing and I'm happy that you did it. I'm proud of you."
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
What empathetic kids you're raising.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. I I'm going to stay with that. Let me ask you about that because I think that there's a common narrative around ADHD. And I grew up in an ADHD household. I grew up with, some of my kids also have ADHD. My last partner had ADHD. So it's something that I'm surrounded by. And yet, because of these people who are around me so much, I'm really conscious that their narrative is that there is something wrong with them. They can tell me all, and I guess you hear this in the media as well, the in society, I should say. ADHD people are disorganized, they're messy, they're late, they lose things. And some of those things can be true, but every strength and weakness, like every strength has a flip side and every weakness has a flip side. We don't hear about the strengths of ADHD the way we do with other things.
No.
I want a line in the sand. I want to call it right now. I call it out with my kids constantly. The people in my life, I'm calling it out to. But where do you see what are the strengths with ADHD? So we know in fact, let's call out the other side first. So what would you say are the stereotypical things that people currently attribute the qualities that people currently attribute to ADHD?
They're unreliable.
Yeah.
They are late for everything. They can't focus on anything. They're disorganized. They are overly emotional. Oh, and my favorite, they're just over the top. They're too much.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, there's a few more, but they're probably the ones that come to mind to start with.
So I have to confess, because my psychologist recently, so I've been working with a psychologist for a few years now, and recently we've been working through some stuff related to trauma, and recently he said to me that he thinks that I have ADHD. And I was like, no, I don't. No, I don't think I do. I think it's just that I think that the behaviours you're seeing are related to circumstances. They're related to the trauma, so they're a trauma response, and they're related to growing up in an ADHD household. But I have to tell you that speaking with you today, I'm starting to think, Caroline, that maybe I need to be a bit more open-minded. Anyway, so tell me. Yeah, and I suspect that a lot of people who will listen to this today are probably listening like me, thinking, I'm listening to this because I want to support those I love. Not necessarily because I have ADHD, but I'm listening to this to support the people who I love. And as we're talking, while I'm having this revelation of going, oh, I think I might need to tune in a little bit more, I suspect that a whole lot of other people are going to be doing the same thing.
Probably.
So tell me, so these are the attributes that we know of stereotypically that we associate with ADHD. the OTT, and I think, yeah, okay. Tell me, what's the flip side? What are the strengths that you see?
The strengths that I see, there's so many, but the flip side of the myths, I guess, or the stereotypical traits that
Yeah.
think we have. The flip side of not being able to rely on them. The ADHDers that I have in my life, and the majority of the people that are closest to me, in terms of, my two sons are both ADHD, and my three very close girlfriends are as well.
Wow.
Because they're drawn to each other. I guess
Wow.
it's this weird thing. And if you talk to, I've got an amazing ADHD coach network that I have all over the world, actually, because I did my coach training through an academy over in New York. And we're all, it's this sort of unsaid little, understanding that, we're all drawn to each other. So I don't know what similar personalities, I
So
guess.
interesting. Yeah.
But so the
Okay,
flip
so
side
between...
the flip side of unreliable, the ADHDs can be the most loyal, trustworthy human beings that you'll ever meet. And giving, most of the ADHDers I know would literally give you the shirt off their back if it was going to, to help someone out. So, unreliable. That's, unreliable in certain situations, perhaps, but a blanket unreliable, no, they're totally loyal. Yeah. OTT.
And the focus? Oh, sorry.
Oh, okay.
Don't let me take your stride.
Focus. You know how ADHD stands for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder? Well,
Yes.
I like to actually talk about this, and this actually came from my coach training as well. I like to think of it as more of a lack of interest. So if an ADHD is interested in something,
Yep.
this idea of not being able to focus on anything, that just we can completely throw that out the window. So yes, focus can be an issue if it's not something that we are, overly interested in. So that's why it's so important, all of the, the students that I'm working with that are sort of choosing their elective subjects and things like that, they can, Dad's telling me that I have to do German. I hate German. I'm never going to live in Germany. Why? Do you want me to have to talk to Dad? And so then we have a conversation around, you know what? Your daughter she's so amazing at drama. Yes, she's OTT, but look at her perform. She's amazing. And so then they go on to, absolutely thrive doing the things that they love, and they love school as opposed to hating going and, all sorts, all of that sort of stuff. So, so that focus piece, the important thing there is to just, try and surround yourself with things that you're interested in if you have ADHD, because then the focus won't be a problem.
Yeah, beautiful. I think there's this idea of focus. It's one that has come up a lot with conversations for me and those in my world with ADHD. And I think that they'll often say, I'm terribly disorganized, and I don't see that at all. I mean, yes, definitely. There are things that slip through the cracks. There are definitely things that slip through the cracks. And I'm super organized. So it drives me crazy. Like it drives me crazy. And it's something that I need to manage because at the same time that I'm frustrated by the things that slip through the cracks, and some of them are important. At the same time, I also look at them and I go, I don't think you are disorganized. I don't think you are disorganized. I think what is actually happening is that you just organize on a way different level. Like, I am organized within one world. It's like that, you know, the Spider-Man movies. There's like all the Spider-Man movies, and that they were all, you know, like Peter Parker exists in his world. And then there was that movie about the multiverse where there's like, was it 7 different universes or something? You can tell it wasn't my thing. So I wasn't really, you know, I was in the next room doing 3 things at the same time. But when the kids got into it, there's the multiverse. That's what happens for those in my life who have ADHD, and the clients who I've worked with, although I've not specifically coached them on ADHD, I've had clients who have ADHD, and they just have such a more complex network of things to focus on. It's like, instead of just having one world, they've got 7 worlds all going at the same time, and manage them all just as tightly as we're trying to manage, as I'm trying to manage one world. And that sort of, it's extraordinary. So I don't think it is actually disorganized. I think it's just organized in a different way at a much more complex level. And because I spoke to a pediatrician who was saying that with one of her clients had said to her, so this client, this young child had gone on to medication, or a teenager had gone on to medication for ADHD, and she was asking him, what does it feel like being on medication or not medicated? And he said, this kid said to her, I feel as though every day there are 7 TVs on, and when I have the medication, I can hear one TV. The others are still there, but I can actually focus on one TV. I'm not hearing 7 at the same time. I found that so interesting.
My eldest son said something similar. He said, I remember the first time he tried his ADHD medication. He was 11 at the time. And he said it was really quiet. And I just sort of looked over at him at one point and said, are you okay? How are you feeling? And he said, Mummy, it's like someone's turned the static radio off and everything's quiet.
Wow. Yeah.
And my other son, who was diagnosed last year actually, so he was a little bit older than my first son, and he said to me, he took the medication and went to school. And he came home. I said, how did you go? You know, how are you focusing, and how was school? How did you manage? He said, Mum, it was unbelievable. I think I did so much work. And at one point I dropped my pen on the desk and I could actually hear the pen drop, as opposed to muffled noises all around me. And yeah.
Wow.
It was amazing.
That's extraordinary.
It does make a huge difference, massive difference.
That's amazing. Okay, Caroline, for adults, there are so many other things, particularly for adult women. There are so many things that are going on at the moment that could be confused with ADHD symptoms, right? So, for instance, for mums, we've got all the hats that we wear. We have potentially anxiety. And anxiety could be related to all sorts of things. We also have menopause, perimenopause. I was talking to somebody a few weeks ago about actually grey area drinking, baked Peroni, and she was talking about the fact that it can be quite tricky because, you know, you can go to a GP and say, hey, I've got these symptoms. And the GPs are not necessarily experts in any one of these areas. So we tend to, for a lot of women, myself, many others, it's reported widely now that GPs don't tend to have enough narrow expertise in the specific common areas that are affecting women. And partly that has to do with research. A lot of the research that we're seeing is general population and not gender specific. So that can be a big problem. But my question for you is, my question for you is, how much confusion is there and how much overlap is there between things like, general wellness that could be impacting our ability to focus, sleep, menopause, perimenopause, and ADHD? How much overlap is there between the symptoms of these things?
There's a huge, huge overlap. And again,
okay, crushing blow. Thank you.
Sorry to deliver that news. Look, there is a lot of overlap because the symptoms of ADHD and hormonal shifts and perimenopausal symptoms, so many of them are similar. With perimenopause, we've got sleeplessness. Well, ADHD, every single ADHD client that I've ever worked with, and including myself as well, I've struggled with sleep all through my life. Brain fog with perimenopause. Well, ADHD, pre-medication, I always felt like I was just in a fog nonstop. And actually, as I got older and I, hit my early to mid 40s, that brain fog just got even worse. So that actually is the thing that probably that was one of the main contributors that led me to, exploring my own ADHD and my own brain wiring. It was easier for me because my eldest had been diagnosed at the time and I had enrolled in my training. And so I had access to all of the statistics out there, and all of the symptoms and how it does present differently in women. So I sort of started ticking all of these boxes and going, oh my goodness, right, this is something that I need to look into. Anyway, so back to the overlapping symptoms. So we've got sleeplessness in both ADHD and perimenopause. We've got the brain fog in both. We have emotional dysregulation, so mood swings, the inability to contain or, control our emotional reactions to things in both perimenopause.
Wait, that's an ADHD thing as well?
Absolutely, yep.
I had no idea.
Emotional regulation is one of the 12 executive skills that make up our executive function. And actually probably the most prevalent symptom or the most common ADHD symptom that we see in both men and women actually is emotional dysregulation.
Wow.
Which of course is a huge symptom of perimenopause and menopause as well.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's 3 that I've listed: brain fog, sleeplessness, and emotional dysregulation. So you can see there's that overlap there, definitely. So that's why it's a tricky road to navigate for many women out there who are questioning their cognition and what's wrong with me.
Okay. So if the symptoms have such a clear overlap or such a distinct overlap, does that mean then that, I think that brings up more questions for me than answers, right? Because with some other things, is there a common ground in your experience with the solutions?
A common ground.
Medication's obviously going to be different, but yeah.
Yeah, common ground in what context, Kath?
Yeah, so I guess what I'm thinking is if we are, so for instance, the medication for ADHD is going to be vastly different to the medication for perimenopause, yeah?
Yeah.
But I'm really curious about, some of the wellness aspects of caring through the symptoms of perimenopause. I'm really curious about, is there a common ground do those also help ADHD behaviours?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So obviously, with both ADHD and hormonal changes and perimenopause, with both conditions, we have the pharmacological treatment approach, which is medications,
Yeah.
and then we've got the
Yeah.
non-pharmacological approach, which is lifestyle. Yep.
Sure.
So with both ADHD and perimenopause, lifestyle and the choices that we make in terms of how we look after ourselves and our bodies and our brains is huge. Yeah. So, and I think that whilst the drugs are, the gold standard for effectiveness in both conditions, most clinicians, I would hope that every clinician would say the same, is that they need to be held, in the same importance. So, taking your ADHD medication doesn't mean that you can just forget about, all of the other stuff that you can be doing yourself in the background. It doesn't mean that you can be, staying up really late at night and, not exercising or, not looking after your diet or, doing all of those sorts of things. So absolutely eating a balanced diet. So we know that protein, when we include enough protein in our diet for ADHD, that actually leads to an increase in a really important neuromodulator that our prefrontal cortex, so our brain, needs for optimal executive function. So protein is super important in our diet for ADHD, and it's important in perimenopausal women as well in their diets. Yeah, so that's why. Exercise, it's been proven that exercise actually has a similar impact on serotonin and dopamine as our SSRIs, which is an anti-anxiety medication.
I've read that. And the impacts are way longer lasting.
Yeah.
Sorry,
that's why you often hear runners. You often hear runners talk about that runner's rush, or the endorphin rush that runners experience after a run, and that's why they get so addicted to it. It's because it's that serotonin rush. And it does the same for dopamine as well. So so exercise, moving our bodies every day. And the tricky thing, and this is important to note actually, because a lot of women that are listening today would probably be thinking, I haven't, the narrative in their heads probably thinking, I don't exercise, I'm not doing this, I'm not doing that. If you are experiencing hormonal shifts and you are in that stage of your life where you are experiencing perimenopause, or you're questioning it, it's really difficult to actually feel like you've got enough energy to actually get out there and exercise. And I think that's why social media annoys me so much, because they put these on, Instagram, for example, it's just, unrealistic expectations of, we should be doing this and we should be doing that. What we should be doing is actually being, practicing curiosity and self-compassion and asking ourselves, what do I need to know about my body? What can I learn about my body to support it more?
Caroline, that's beautiful. And I am so, so grateful for this conversation with you today. As you sit here radiating with your gorgeous beachy hair, fresh from Bondi, that is such a beautiful, beautiful question to finish on. Just gorgeous, just gorgeous. So if somebody is asking themselves that question, what do I need to know to help my body? I'm going to ask you to repeat the question so I don't pulled apart.
What do I need?
Tell us the question again.
So what do I need to find out about my body and my brain to be able to support it more?
I love that. Okay. And where do you suggest that somebody looks for quality information, given that the GP is the most common first step and at the moment is just not often the best? It's not often where the best answers come from. Where do you suggest, where do we go? Where do we go? Where do we look for answers?
Well, you can come to me.
Yeah.
There are so many different avenues that women can take to actually reach out for support. I think the biggest hurdle is actually being brave enough to actually reach out and actually put yourself first. So, if you do have a really good family GP that you've known, for a long time and who knows your history, that's the key. If you've got that longitudinal data and lived experience, your GP, you obviously trust them if you've been with them for that long. GP should be able to help you. But, if you're not in that position with a GP, then, there's different avenues that you can take. There's, if you are querying ADHD, there are lots of coaches that are professionally trained like myself out there that would be happy to support you and help you navigate the journey and help you start asking the right questions. There are psychologists as well. But again, it's with anything, it's about finding the right fit. So you've got to feel,
for sure.
you've got to find someone that you feel comfortable with.
Yeah, too true. So I'm hearing be brave and keep looking. Keep asking the question. Yeah. Caroline, thank you so much. What a breath of fresh air. I don't remember the last time I cried on a podcast. Thank you. Appreciate that. It was sobering and really insightful. I will make sure that the links for everybody are in the show notes for this episode. Let me hit end of this recording.
I didn't mean to make you cry. It's
Oh, I know. Those stats are so full on. So full on. 20,000 more thoughts. By what age was it?
12.
God. That's so frightful. By age 12. And for me, as a coach, I know, I've seen it firsthand, and I've seen the research that says that we need 7 positive thoughts for every negative thought, for that negative thought to be counteracted. Yeah. That's a lot of loving that these ADHD kids and adults need to come up to not feeling broken.
Love and empathy and compassion, not only from those around them, but to learn how to be compassionate with themselves as well. Yes.
And I love that that's the focus of the work that you do. I know we've spoken before about the different approaches that people have to working through how to live with their ADHD more effectively. And some have different approaches. There are some who are like, take a pill and suck it up, buttercup. There are others who are medicine and that's it. There are some who are, I've just said that one, strength focus. And that I think is incredibly powerful. And it is, it's incredibly powerful. And often it's where I tend to sit as well. but on its own, it lacks something, and that is the compassion piece that you bring. It's so powerful. So powerful. I think that the self-compassion is extraordinary, and you only get it. You know, I always say courage needs encouragement. So I just applaud you enormously for the work that you're doing.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm honoured. I feel very lucky that I've found this career path, because it's you know, someone said to me when I first did my strengths profile, when I started my coach journey, you know, spirituality was one of the ones, and you know, I didn't really consider myself to be overly spiritual, but you know, our strengths change as we evolve as people, and when we learn to, you know, understand ourselves better and to practice more self-compassion. And so I've just done my strengths profile again recently, and you know, when I was answering the questions, you know, do you feel like you've been, you know, do you think that there's a higher power guiding you for a reason, and do you think that you
yeah.
And I, you know, 2 years ago, it was like, no, never. But after my experience of working with so many amazing people, and seeing just what, you know, seeing them thrive and make changes and start accepting themselves for who they are, you know, spirituality has jumped up to one of my signature strengths now, because I do really believe that I've found my calling.
How beautiful. How absolutely beautiful. I love that for you. You know, I believe that women do help other women. I hope that this episode has empowered you to question your willingness to go last. I hope that you will embrace balance, and I'm also hoping that you will help me to help other women to do the same. So how can you help? Show your support for the work. Subscribe and review the podcast here where you're listening. Follow the Goddess of Balance on Instagram to catch some cheeky behind the scenes and extras. Connect with me on LinkedIn and share the posts with your network. That would be sensational. If you have enjoyed this program, this episode, you will no doubt love my group coaching program. You've got to find all the links to these in the little written blurb for this episode. Thank you, my friend, for normalizing balance with me. We are raising performance and reputations, wellness and equality. Together, we're creating positive change for working women, starting with you. Sincerely, I thank you for being part of the movement.